Hi, it's Jen Freeman. I'm talking kind of quiet because all the little critters in my house are asleep. That would be the two 8-year-old twins. Except Mr. Cameraman, he's behind me, he's not asleep. Anyways, it's late. I'm getting ready to head to bed for the night, but I want to share with you what I do with my leftover vegetables. What? Leftover vegetables? They're in the freezer. I shared a video with you earlier about how I put my vegetables aside. Ones that are kind of starting to get maybe a little bit soft, but I don't want to use them in fresh salads or other things. I'll show you what my frozen vegetables look like, but I'm going to grab my frozen vegetables. I'm going to grab my crock pot. I'm going to put these frozen vegetables in to simmer overnight to make my homemade vegetable stock. So tomorrow I'm going to make some soup. I also will store some of my homemade stock. I'll teach you how I'm going to store that so you can save yourself money because you're not buying those cans of vegetable stock at 50 cents a can if you find them on sale. You're going to be able to basically make free vegetable stock, homemade, yummy, delicious, but let's get started. It's quiet. We do this at night right before we go to bed. Vegetables, crock pot, water. When I'm getting my vegetables from Bountiful Baskets especially, if I got a lot of the inside stalks of the celery that I'm not going to use, sometimes I do use these in my cooking and I'll dry some of the leaves to have my celery flakes. But when I'm not going to do that, I leave all the pieces in here. So look, here's all the flakes from the celery that I didn't use. Here's some of my peeled carrots. The other thing that I do, which is something you may have never even thought of, do not drop it on the floor because you can't use it then. Okay, let me turn my bag over. This is something you might not have ever thought of, but I love the flavor that this adds. These are the ends of oranges. You can use lemons, oranges, limes. The citrus tastes so good. There's just a little hint of citrus in the vegetable stock. You'll never really know it's there, but you'll know that there's something that just kind of brightens up the vegetable stock. How I get these is whenever I'm slicing my oranges for the kids to eat and peel open or put them in my fruit trays or that type of thing. These are just the end pieces. I wash all of my fruit before I cut it. Sometimes you don't think about washing your fruit like your citrus as it sits out, but wash it because then if you're going to use this in your stock, you definitely want it clean. So I use these. I don't put a lot in there. I put maybe the equivalent of one orange. And then in here, I'm going to share with you some of this. So you just see some of the different things I put. It's a little bit of everything. This is like the softer outside piece of the onion that I'm not going to use. I had a lot of red peppers that just started getting a little bit dried out, so then I popped them in my freezer bag. I have a Ziploc bag in my freezer at all times that I will put my vegetables in. This is another bag that I have that I started. And in this one, I have lots more celery, but these are tomatoes. The tomatoes started getting soft. I was getting ready to leave town. I thought I'm not going to get these used up, so I'm going to stick them in here. There's even a strawberry in here. It'll get a little bit of flavor. Normally, I don't use the strawberries, but like here's like the caps from my orange peppers. So there's just a little bit of this, a little bit of that. In here, same thing. These were some peppers that I ended up not using. Here's some of my peels. My onion skin peels. There you go. All right, so let me take these over to the crock pot, fill it with water, and set it for the night. I do have my biggest crock pot I can find. I have two different crock pots. This one I use for my stocks or when I'm making extra chili or soups or stews, anything that I want to be able to do a little bit of freezer cooking with. I'll make it in my big crock pot so I can divide that up and have some additional meals. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to fill this up to the top with my vegetables. I'm going to fill this up. See, these are, whenever I was doing my carrots, I just washed them really good and scrubbed them, and then I peeled those carrots because I was using them for a veggie tray. And so that part of the vegetable is really good, has a ton of vitamins and nutrition, but you know, it's not quite as pretty sometimes, but it's great for using in your stock. So throw anything in here. I even have pieces from my kale that I had, you know, the stalks from the kale, because it gives great flavor. What else do I have in here that I can think of? Oh, sometimes I'll pop a little garlic. Sometimes it's like when I get down to the point where I'm looking at the vegetables and I'm thinking, you know, they're just kind of at the edge where they've got great flavor, but they're just not that super crispness that I like. That's whenever I put them in my freezer bags to just use them, because it's going to be really good flavor for the vegetable stock. And again, I use the vegetable stock for just about anything. When I cook rice, I will put my homemade vegetable stock in there, gives it extra flavor. When I do pasta, sometimes I'll use my homemade vegetable stock. I will make vegetable soup, which is very simple, very frugal, economical to make. I use vegetable stock kind of just about in anything that you're going to use water in that's going to be absorbed up. I will even use vegetable stock in my potatoes, just about anything. It gives just that extra flavor, plus on the added side benefit of that is it's giving your family a lot of extra nutrition, and you don't even really have to do it. And this is what I would have thrown down my sink. The average person would throw this down their sink, unless you compost, which would be wonderful, but I don't. But this would normally go in my garbage. So let me fill this up. I'm going to fill it as much as I can, and then I'm going to pour my water over the top and get this started for the night. Oh, one thing I put in here, whenever I have fresh herbs, like I'll have parsley, I'll have dill, I'll have chives, I'll have some different things like that, green onions. I'll pop those in here. So don't forget any of those fresh herbs you might have that are getting wilty or old. A little cilantro, if you happen to have it, is a good thing. So anything, just about anything you can think of can go in here. All right, I'm just gonna pour some water, stir over the top of my frozen vegetables. Another vegetable I have in here that you might not have thought about is leeks. I got leeks for my Bountiful baskets and used most of them, and I had one left over and couldn't really come up with anything to do with it. So I put it in my freezer bag. So another thing I do that will save you money, and a tip I have shared in the past, but you may not have heard about it, is this bag is the inside waxy bag of cereal. So I rinse these out and save them. They're really, really heavy. They're great for me to pop my vegetables in and keep them in the freezer, because then I can have my little sections that go in a great big Ziploc bag. So I'm going to fill this up with a little bit more water, but before I do that, I'm going ahead and add my salt. And you know what? I'm not a measurer. I just kind of add a little bit. So I'm just going to put some salt in here. I'll test it out and try it tomorrow morning. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my crock pot to go on low. It's going to cook for the night and make a really delicious, delicious vegetable stock for me to use tomorrow. When I get up in the morning, I'll fill this a little bit more water, but when I get up in the morning, I will share with you what I'm going to do with this extra vegetable stock. So let me encourage you to not waste any food. Come up with something else you can do. This is a way that you can save money on produce. Produce is expensive. There's no need to throw it away. You can make great homemade, flavorful meals, soups, all kinds of other things with it. This, just think about this. I don't know what, there's a couple pounds of vegetables here. Think about how much money that saved us. All right, well, let me see you in the morning. I'm gonna head to bed in just a few minutes. Night. Ugh, look at that mess I gotta clean up first though. Well, I let my vegetables cook all night long. The one advantage of letting them cook throughout the night, they can cook for an extra long time because you're starting out with frozen vegetables. So you remember you need them to get nice and hot so all those yummy flavors can come out. So what I'm gonna do now that I got up in the morning, I shut this off a little while ago so it's cooled a little bit. This is my giant crock pot. I need to strain the vegetables out of the broth. This is the easiest method I've ever found. I just have a great big huge strainer. I put it inside my pot because I'm going to be making some vegetable soup afterwards, and I'm going to store a little bit of this vegetable stock also, and I'll share with you how I do that. So you have a lot of different options and ideas, but all I'm doing is taking the vegetables out, and actually these vegetables still even have great color and flavor. If you compost, obviously you can still use these for that, but I will probably not do anything else with these vegetables since I'm not composting. And remember, I did put a couple of lemons in here and also some pieces of orange because I like that extra flavor it gives. I did include tomatoes in this batch of my vegetable stock, but if you want your vegetable stock to come out really light and clear in color, do not add tomatoes because it will give it a little bit more of a darker color. Also, if you're adding onion skin will also darken your vegetable broth. I don't mind the darkened vegetable broth because I like the flavor and the color. Now, another thing I did right when I was putting this on last night to start cooking that I don't think I had already mentioned to you is I put a couple of bay leaves in here. I always kind of rummage through my herb drawer in the refrigerator and put some fresh things in. I had some parsley I put in. I had a little bit of fresh thyme because I have some herbs on the side of the house that I grow all year long. I put that in, and then I grabbed a couple bay leaves. So don't forget about flavoring that. See, here's the tomato that I had. Okay, so I'm going to get all of this scooped out. So at this point, all I'm doing is scooping out the majority of the big vegetables that I can get. I am not going to pour my broth over the top of this because all I'm going to do is add more of that liquid to this top, which is going to be harder for me to get all of the juices out. But this is my trick for you. Here's a tip. I get a flat bottom glass, and now I just start pushing on it so I don't lose any of that super, super yummy broth that I just made, because the vegetable broth is so delicious. I don't want to lose it. I don't want to put any down the drain. So right now, scoop just the big chunks of vegetables out. After I do this, can you see, I don't know if you can see this. Can you see all of the broth that's still in there? If I just leave this to drain on its own, it's going to take forever to get this broth out. And at this point, I want to be moving on and getting it done. I am not pouring that over the top. I will do that in a few minutes. Now, there's some vegetables that I would suggest not using, and they're the ones that smell really yucky when you're cooking them, like broccoli and cabbage, cauliflower. There's some of those that I would certainly leave out. I personally do not put potatoes in because I think it makes the water too murky. I know some people do use potatoes. It's completely up to you. If you want that light, clear broth, you certainly do not want to use potatoes. If you manage to get tired, enlist the help of children. Thanks, honey. It's a lot of work to do that. So once I've drained, squeezed out all the juice I can get, I'm just going to throw these away. If you have another use for them, certainly put it to use, and then you'll get even double your value out. So this is the juice that I initially got out of those vegetables. Now I'm going to pour this over and strain all of the last little bits and pieces out of here. So after measuring, I ended up with 18 cups of vegetable broth out of my large crock pot. I just put my vegetable broth back in this crock pot today because I'm going to make a vegetable bean soup. I will link you to a recipe that I'm going to use for that. So I didn't have to double strain this. Now my vegetable broth that I did using my smaller crock pot, I did double strain it, and then, which was using the larger strainer, and then this is the only really fine mesh strainer I have, but it actually works nice and easy to then double strain it, and I let it sit. So all of the extra stuff in there is now settled in the bottom of here. But what I'm going to do is these 8 cups of vegetable broth that I got out of my small crock pot, I am going to freeze in these cubes. I freeze my vegetable broth in several different ways. One in ice cubes so I can add it by size. These are about a little over a tablespoon each. So I know how many tablespoons I can add to a recipe when I want to have that variance. I also will freeze it with using half-cup measurements, and I'll just literally pour that in a Ziploc bag. I lay them flat on a cookie sheet so they freeze nice and flat and thin. And then I take those thin bags of the broth and put them in another great big Ziploc bag, and they store nice and easy. I'll show you what that looks like at the very end. But today I'm going to also add it to my ice cube trays just for the ease of that. I keep these in my freezer and pop them into my recipes. So I measured a half a cup of vegetable broth into these plastic bags. I would buy the cheapest Ziploc bags you possibly can because this is going to be double bagged, and it can get expensive if you end up having to have $1, $2, $3 into all these Ziploc bags. But look at how nice and clear and yummy that is. Yummy! So all I'm going to do is I'm going to lay them on the cookie sheets, and then it's going to freeze like this, and then when I store it, it's going to just get stored in another big Ziploc bag, nice and easy. So this is the final product of the vegetable broth. I put it in large bags to put into soups, or I have small ones to put into different recipes. I got a lot more than this, but I just wanted to let you see what this looks like, and it's very easy to store. I'll just put these in a Ziploc bag after I get them off of here, put them in a Ziploc bag and store them, nice and easy. I leave this frozen until I'm ready to use it and just pull it out of the Ziploc bag. My fingers are freezing right now though. Oh my goodness, it's cold. I got a stock pot full of cabbage and potatoes and carrots and garlic. So I just put it in there and I'll let it reduce down. So be careful not to overfill your Ziploc bags. I overfilled one of them, and as obviously it froze, it expands and kind of squeezed out the Ziploc bag. So do be careful not to fill them too full. And then also, I tried using Ziploc bags from the dollar store. Yeah, I'll never do that again. The Ziploc bags from the dollar store are just not strong enough. And I'm going to store these little ones initially in my plastic bag that I get out of my cereal box, and I recycle those just because it's a super, super thick, waxy bag. And then I'll put this inside a Ziploc bag in my freezer so it helps preserve it, so I have months and months to use up my vegetable broth. There you go. I hope this saves you a lot of money. I love making things from scratch. I love turning items I have in my refrigerator into something else and getting like double the value. So come visit me at tipresource.com. I'll try to help you as much as I possibly can, living a frugal life, saving you tons of money, living almost free, and you can check there for that recipe for the vegetable and bean soup I'm making.